Good afternoon, I'm the Modern Warfare historian, and today we're going to take a look to make a review about the film that probably is my favorite role. I'm talking about A Bridge Too Far, made in 1977. The movie is based on the 1974 book with the same name from Cornelius Ryan, and it's about Operation Market Garden, the Allied Ireland offensive to liberate Holland and end the war in 1944. Before we start, I want to take a second to say, you might have guessed it already, spoiler alert. If you haven't watched the movie, I suggest you to open a new tab, watch it and come back. Reason being that I don't want to ruin your experience because I'm going to ruin it, trust me. Before we talk about the movie, it is correct to talk about the real Operation Market Garden first. The operation was divided into two parts. Market was an airborne assault to capture key bridges, and Garden was a ground offensive to connect the positions captured by the airborne troops and create a thrust into the German position. On the 6th of August 1944, Allied forces landed in Normandy, breaching the Atlantic Wall and liberating France from the Axis occupation. The problem with the French campaign was logistics, and to be honest, this is always everyone's problem when conducting offensive operations. The Allied had planned to use Cherbourg Harbor to resupply their troops in the phases after the landings, but it was destroyed by the German garrison before it surrendered. Therefore, the Allied created the Red Bull Express to resupply their units, a famous supply convoy system that was created ad hoc on the spot after a 36-hour meeting. This was just a temporary solution, and a better one was to use a deep-sea port like the one at Antwerp that was captured on the 4th of September, virtually intact, by Montgomery troops. However, it shall be noted that there were enemy troops near the Scheldt estuary, so the port was almost useless at first. On the other side of the front, the Germans had problems of their own. After being defeated in Normandy, in the Falaise pocket, and in almost all of France, they retreated to the Moselle River in the south and to the Belgian-Holland border in the north. Also, in the other side of the Reich, the Germans had suffered a crushing blow from the Soviets after Operation Bagration that destroyed completely Army Group Center. At this moment in time, everyone thought that Germany was on the brink of collapse. However, due to the aforementioned supply issues, the Allied were not able to fully make their superiority useful. To put it very simple, the Allied High Command could only support one of their three army groups. In the south, near the Swiss Alps, the US 6th Army Group under Lieutenant General Jacob L. Devers. In the middle, from Epinal to Maastricht, the US 12th Army Group under Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, and in the north, the British 21st Army Group led by Field Marshal Sir Bernard Montgomery. The latter will be under today's spotlight as Market Garden was created to push his army group as the main Allied priority. The plan was, on paper, very simple. Drop 3 airborne divisions and an independent brigade and use the 3 British Corps to first connect with the paratrooper and then continue with the hook maneuver to bypass from the north the Siegfried Line, the German defensive line built before the war on the border with France, Belgium and part of the Netherlands. But as everyone who has a small knowledge of military history could tell, easy plans on paper gets more and more complicated by the hour, especially because in a war, usually the enemy tries to counter your moves. By looking with the Allied command's eye, that this offensive could have brought closer the end of the war, not only because they would destroy a lot of German units, but also because they could threat the Ruhr, the German industrial lands in the west. One should also not forget that the airborne units of the Western Allied nation had been combined recently in the 1st Airborne Corps, and they had not been used recently as the quick shift in the front line position made it impossible to plan successful drops, and those were always cancelled. This could have been their chance to use the Corps in its finest role to end the war by 1944. However, the plan was compromised by a harsh planning and with various objectively bad choices. First, the plan was to take Eindhoven, Nijmegen and Arnhem and have the ground units reach the latter city in just 2 days, after going 63 miles, slightly more than 100 kilometers, in just 2 days. That does not seem a lot to civilians, but you have to consider that you are doing this while on the other side there are a lot of people with big scary guns pointed at you, with the sole objective of stopping you. Second, the troops being launched behind enemy lines, being paratroopers, tended to carry very few supplies with them. Therefore, speed was the key factor, as the ground units could not go behind schedule. Third, not all the airborne units will be dropped on the first day, therefore those with the surprise element will be far lower at first than as a standard. Fourth major factor was that the ground element would do their dash on a single road, Highway 69, A50 on the map. That was later nicknamed Hell's Highway, and I guess this could be considered a spoiler for those who did not know how Operation Market Garden ended, but let's not go too much forward in time. Fifth huge problem in the planning was the British landing zone. Due to the presence of German airfield that had a lot of anti-air guns, the drop had to be done 8 miles, that's 12 km, from Arnhem, thus giving the Germans enough time to create some sort of defensive line, or at least defensive move to, at the lowest, annoy, and at the highest, completely destroy the Allied units there. However, it shall be noted that the outcome of the operation would have probably been the same even if the units destined to Arnhem would have been dropped closer. Still, the distance did not help. Sixth and last major problem was that the whole operation was planned with a picture of very low quality German troops as enemies, literally Hitler Youth and old men on bicycle. Guess who was there? 2 SS Panzer Division and the 1st Fallschirmarmee. The first would be a problem because the Allied paratroopers carried very light anti-tank equipment. The second, on the other hand, would become a spine on the Allied side because of two reasons. Being paratroopers, it is kind of easy to understand that their officers will know what strengths and weaknesses the Allied paras will have, especially as time moves on and they go low on ammunition. The second reason is that the units under Kurt Student had just been trained on anti-paratrooper operation, so they tended to generally know what to do. The Allied knew about the presence of these units, especially tank units. However, the Allied High Command decided just to simply ignore the reports from the Dutch underground resistance. Why nobody said anything? To put it simply, no one wanted to rock the boat and ruin the biggest operation since D-Day. And this is precisely the reason why Operation Market Garden failed: overconfidence. The Allied thought that they could make 63 miles in 2 days, well, they just made around 7 in the first 24 hours. They thought that they would be able to capture all the bridges, but the Sun Bridge was blown up in front of their eyes, and it was one of the first ones that needed to be crossed. And as you might have guessed, in order to repair it, a Bailey Bridge was necessary, and building it took time. But damn, the bridge construction scene was cool. And for those who don't know me, I am a lot into military engineering. Another bridge that was not captured on the spot was the Nijmegen one. The sector was assigned to the US 82nd Paratroopers that instead of taking the bridge, they stayed near a hill to the southeast of the city and simply shelled a nearby forest, the Reichswald, in fear of enemy units, especially tanks, being there. Only several hours after landing, they decided to send a battalion, 1st Battalion of the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, to take the bridge, only to find the Germans there with what? You guessed it, tanks. Because the bridge was not under the 82nd control, when the British tanks arrived, there was a huge delay that costed the entire operation. If interested on the subject, check the description, there's a link on a recent TIC video on the matter on whose fault was this. Long story short is that the British paratroopers of the 1st Airborne Division were able to capture the bridge of Arnhem, even though their first plan to conquer it with special jeeps fitted with machine guns immediately after the first landing failed, with only one British battalion, the 2nd Parachute Battalion under Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, being able to capture the northern side of the bridge. The rest of the division was bogged down in fighting with the Germans, like the rest of the 1st Parachute Brigade, assigned to protecting the landing zone, like the 1st Air Landing Brigade, or still waiting to be dropped in the following days, like the 4th Parachute Brigade or the 1st Polish Parachute Brigade. So John Frost and his battalion, plus some additional units, were defending the Arnhem Bridge. Around 500 soldiers surrounded by the Germans in the rest of the city and in the southern bank of the river. They were able to hold for some days against the German attacks to recapture the bridge, and the British were able to inflict high casualties against the Germans. But in the end, having the British tanks stalled too long for various reasons, 2nd Battalion was forced to surrender, while the rest of the division was so battered after the operation that it never saw combat again in the war, as they lost 8,000 troops during the combat to capture and hold what was later to be known as the Bridge Too Far. So let's go back to the movie made by Richard Attenborough. The film is 176 minutes long. It was filmed in the Dutch countryside, where the real Operation Market Garden was fought, and it had a huge budget. Why these three things are important? Because thanks to these, we are now able to witness one of the finest epic war movies of all time. Why? Well, you know CGI, forget about that. Here you will see 1,000 people jumping from Dakotas like if they had simply traveled back in time to 1944, and all the jumping scenes were filmed in one single attempt, with the cameraman jumping with the soldier. You will see real tanks and vehicles, not fake cardboard models. Wait. Okay, take that thing away from my screen now. I'm sorry, I have to talk. Much better now. Still alive. Okay, let's say real Allied tanks and vehicles, but this is understandable, as M4 Shermans were still used as tank reserve in some nations, while I guess that most of Panzer IVs had been destroyed around 30 years before. Another thing that a huge budget can buy is a great cast, and boy oh boy, we have some big guys here. For the British, Dirk Bogarde as Lieutenant General Frederick Boy Browning, Michael Caine as Lieutenant General J.O.E. Vandeleur, Sean Connery, rest in peace, as Major General Roy Awkward, Edward Fox as Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks, Anthony Hopkins as Lieutenant Colonel John Frost, Christopher Good as Major Carlyle, a character based on Major Alison Digby Tatham Walter, the famous for bringing an umbrella into battle, Frank Grimes as Major Fuller, fictional character to represent all those who were too shy to rock the boat, while in reality the closest person to this position was Major Brian Awkward, that was an energetic and surely not shy person. For the Americans, James Caan as Staff Sergeant Eddie Dohun, based on Charles Dohun, Elliot Gould as Colonel Robert Stewart, based on Colonel Robert Singh, 506th Parachute Infantry Commanding Officer, Ryan O'Neill as Brigadier General James Gavin, Robert Redford as Major Julian Cook. For the Polish, Gene Hackman as Major General Stanislaw Strasowski. For the Dutch, Laurence Olivier as Dr. Jan Spinder, Liv Ullmann as Kate Thor-Horst, nicknamed Angel of Arnhem, as she tended wounded and dying British soldiers during battle, Eric van Voort as the kid who spotted the German HQ. For the Germans, Hardy Kruger as Generalmajor der Waffen-SS Karl Ludwig, Max Schnell as General der Waffen-SS Wilhelm Dietrich, Walter Kurt as Generalfeldmarschall Walter Model. Of course, these were just the most notable characters, and I'm quite sure that I've mispronounced some of them. Now let's look at what errors were made and what things they got right, but first, a couple of quick announcements. First of all, if you're liking this content, go ahead and press the like button and share with your friends, it helps a lot. Second, we have created a Telegram channel where we post updates and link for all the videos. Third, we created a website, hooray, where we post all our videos and all the sources. And fourth, our team has decided to create a gift for all of you followers. Stay tuned because it will be released in the next weeks. More on that can be found on Telegram and on our website. Now let's go back to ruining the movie with an annoying review. As no historical movie can be perfect, there are some small errors here and there. First of all, while most of the movie has been filmed on real location, the scenes at the Arnhem Bridge have been shot at Deventer, as it resembled more a mid-40s location, also because Arnhem urban development after the war changed the look of the city. Both Allied and German fighters have been portrayed by 4 T-6 Texans, 2 of which from the Royal Netherlands Air Force, and those planes were not the ones used in real life. There are some characters that are modified or invented at all, but again this is normal. The radio are portrayed as being faulty and costing the entire operation. While this is true that the radios were faulty, this was not the first time that the Allied had communication problems, as they had some in Italy, in Normandy, and literally almost everywhere they went. However, in the other occasion, the troops were closer to the front line, so the problem relies in the paratroopers being dropped a lot behind enemy lines, not so much because of faulty equipment. Generalfeldmarschall Walter Model is portrayed as very into himself in a Prussian cliché style, when he thinks that the British are there to capture him, and when he moves to his HQ, the movie creates a radio blackout between Model and his troops that in reality did not exist. Also, when the Germans captured the other planes, they took them seriously, not like in the movie, and those were analyzed by Kurt Student, the commander of the German paratroopers in the area, and he moved his units accordingly. However, what if I told you that the movie producers made a mistake on purpose? Because otherwise you would have thought the movie as wrong. I'm talking about the famous scene where John Frost runs across the street while under fire. To put it simply, British officers don't duck, they walk. Also, one of the worst things of all is that thing. That thing scares me. But what about things that are correct? For example, the scene where Staff Sergeant Eddie Doe finds his captain wounded and forces a field doctor at gunpoint to save his officer's life. That happened, for real, except the jeep scene in the woods with Germans shooting at them. Also, the river crossing on small boats made of wooden canvas, also real. The scene where US Major Cook argues with a British Grenadier commander when they stop after having just crossed the bridge, also true, although with a little more colored words. The ceasefire between the British and German troops to evacuate the wounded, yep, that happened for real. Last but not least, as history buffs talk in his review of the movie, the scene where the Allied general meet on the church tower and Major General Sosabowski says, "Doesn't matter anyways," when a man says to another, "I know what, let's play a war game, everybody dies." A general will never ever even think about saying about something like that, because if a general will think about losing, he loses. And generals tend to not like the idea of losing. And now, after destroying the film, a couple of small personal opinions. This movie is great. The cast is fantastic. The real effects are wonderful. It is impossible not to be wet when there are 1,000 people jumping from planes. Also, it is kinda funny that the producer were able to pull some funny lines here and there, like when John Frost notices that they have the wrong camouflage for urban fighting, and a fellow British soldier looks up to his helmet that has leaves on it. That is probably one of my most favorite scenes, as well as the meeting with all the 30th Corps commanders before the operation. I'm not sure if the funny sentences are real, but considering British humor, they very probably might have been. However, I don't think anything can beat the drop scene, the river crossing, or the wonderful soundtrack. I guess I will now end the video in order to go and listen to it for the rest of my day. Thank you for watching. I know that it has been some time since last video, and I apologize for that. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. See you next time, and remember to always bring urban camouflage in your backpack. You'll never know when it might be useful.